Let's discuss how to interact with RESTful APIs using the Postman tool. Postman is a very popular tool for testing APIs. It will help us to make HTTP requests to an API and see the HTTP responses of those requests. To download Postman, go to postman.com/downloads and download the app by clicking on the button which says download the app. So download the app and then install it like you would install any app on your operating system. After installing it, when you launch Postman for the first time, it will ask you to sign in with a Postman account. So please sign up at that point with the username and password of your choice. So once you sign up and sign in, you will see a screen similar to this screen over here. You can click on this create a request link, or you can click on this plus icon over here to create a new request. I'm going to click on this plus icon now, and you can see that Postman has given us a new screen to create a new request. And now we can create and send HTTP requests from this interface over here. We need an API, so let's start our JSON server. When we discussed about JSON server earlier, we had added some JSON data to a file called books.json. So I will be using that JSON data in our discussion now. If you haven't created such a file, please do so now. Let's examine the JSON data in the books.json file once. The JSON data is specified within curly braces. So this is the opening curly brace, and at the bottom we have the closing curly brace. So this is a JSON object, and within the object we have key called books, and the value for this key is an array which I have selected over here, and this array has two entries. Each entry is an object with the keys ID, title and author, and I have specified arbitrary values for title and author like title 1, author 1, title 2 and author 2, and the IDs are 1 and 2 respectively. And below that we have specified a reviews key also, and we have specified an array for reviews as well. We'll first work with the books data. We'll discuss a couple of examples with reviews towards the end of the discussion. So I'm going to start my JSON server by using this command JSON-server followed by the watch flag --watch, then books.json followed by the port flag --port, and 4000 is the port on which we want to start the JSON server. And you can see that JSON server has created an API for us at localhost :4000, and the resources available to us are /books and /reviews. We'll use /books for most of the discussion, and towards the end we'll do a couple of examples with reviews as well. Before continuing our discussion about Postman and HTTP requests, let us discuss why we need Postman to create HTTP requests. When we type something in the address bar and click enter, what happens is a GET HTTP request is sent by the browser. But we have seen previously that other than GET, there are other types of HTTP requests as well, like POST, PUT, DELETE, PATCH, etc. To create those other requests as well, we'll need to use Postman because it will allow us to create all types of HTTP requests. Please note that there are browser extensions to do exactly what Postman does. That means to create different kinds of HTTP requests to test APIs. But in recent times, it looks like more people are using Postman for that purpose. Let us discuss how to use the Postman tool. There are 4 important areas on this page. The first is this area over here. Using this drop down, we can select the HTTP request method. So we can select either GET or POST or PUT or PATCH or DELETE and so on. And in this area over here, we can specify the URL of the API that we want to interact with. And in this area over here, we can specify any headers that we want to send, or we can specify the message body, which is usually needed for PUT, POST and PATCH methods. That means for creating a new record or for updating a record. For creating a new record or updating a record, we usually need to send a message body. So we can specify that over here. And finally, this area is for the HTTP response. We can have a slightly different layout where the response is at the bottom instead of being on the right like we have it over here now. If you click on this icon over here which says single pane view, we can switch to the single pane view where we have the response below the sections for the request. I will switch back to the 2-pane view by clicking on this icon over here. So this is where we'll select our HTTP request method. This is where we'll specify the URL of the endpoint that we are going to hit, and this is where we'll specify our headers and body, and then we'll click this send button over here and we should see a response over here. Please note that this divider over here, we can move it to the left or to the right, and depending on how much real estate is there for this menu will shrink to a drop down like this. I'll give some more real estate and you can see that the menu will come back again. Also please note that there is a very important menu item over here called code. Sometimes it gets hidden like this due to lack of space. If you click on these dots over here, that should bring up the menu and you can find code over here. This is a very important menu item that we will be using. Now we are ready to start using Postman. So let us make some HTTP requests. The first operation we'll do is retrieve all books using the get HTTP request method against the URL /books. I have get selected over here, and so I will type the URL as http://localhost:4000/books. So I have typed the URL over here now. Let's specify the content type header by using this header section over here. So I'm going to type content-type and I'll specify the value as application/JSON. We don't need to specify the host header because Postman will automatically add that for us. Postman will look at this URL over here and it will infer that localhost:4000 is the host. So it will add this value as the host header. Before clicking on the send button over here, let's go to code and look at the HTTP request that Postman is going to send to this endpoint over here. So I'm going to click on code now and I'm going to select HTTP over here. I have clicked on HTTP now and you can see the HTTP request over here. The first line is our request line where get is our HTTP request method, followed by the path of the URL and followed by the HTTP version. And below our request line we have a couple of headers. The first is the host header whose value is localhost:4000 and the second header is content-type whose value is application/JSON. So basically Postman has created this HTTP request using the values that we have specified in its interface. I'm going to close this now and let us click on send now. I have clicked on send and we can see the body of the response over here now, which is the books.json data in books.json. This array over here, we are seeing that array has been returned in the HTTP response. Next, let us create a HTTP request to retrieve one book, say with ID 1. So we'll have to use the get HTTP request method against the URL /books/1. So let's do that. Here I have get already selected in the dropdown, and in the URL we need to specify the ID of the book we want to retrieve. Since we want to retrieve the book with ID 1, so we need to specify 1 in the URL. So let's do that. So I'll modify this URL to include the ID of the book, which is 1. I'll leave the content type as application/JSON and I'm going to click on send now. So I have clicked send and as you can see the response is an object. It is a JSON object and it has the keys ID, title and author, and the ID is 1, which is what we specified in the URL. Let's check books.json and see if this data matches with the data in books.json. And as you can see the data matches. The ID is 1, the title is title 1 and the author is author 1. By the way, let us go and check the HTTP request in code. So I'm going to click on code now. So this is the HTTP request that Postman has created for us. Let's examine the request line. Get is the HTTP request method, /book/1 is the path, and then we have the HTTP version, and below the request line we have a couple of headers, host and content type, whose values are localhost:4000 and application/JSON respectively. Let us next create a book. To create a new book record, we have to use the post HTTP request method against the URL /books. So let's do that. So I'm going to change the HTTP request method from get to post, and I'm going to change this URL from /book/1 to just /books. And for headers, let us leave content type as application/JSON. Whenever we do a post request, we need to specify the message that we want to post to the server in the body section of the request. Since we want to create a new book record, the body section should include details about the new record. So let's specify that. In this dropdown over here, I'm going to select raw. You can see that a second dropdown has appeared on the right over here, and the currently selected value is JSON. Just in case if the value is not JSON, please make sure to select that value from the dropdown. So basically what we have done here is we have specified that our message body is going to be in the JSON format. So let's specify our message body now. It's going to be a JSON object. So I have specified the curly braces. If you look at a book record, it has the fields title and author. So we have to specify new values for title and author for our new book record. So let's do that. So I'm going to type title as title 3, and I'm going to specify author as author 3. In the body of the request, we have specified a new title and we have specified a new author. Before clicking send, let's go to code and examine the HTTP request once. As you can see here, Postman has created this HTTP request for us. Let's examine the request line. The HTTP request method is post. The path is /books, and that is followed by the HTTP version. There are 3 headers here. First is host, which is localhost :4000. Then we have content type, which is application/JSON. And Postman has also added a third header called content-length, whose value is 52. And below the headers, we have an empty line over here. And below the empty line, we have our message body over here, which is JSON data. And the JSON data includes 2 fields, title and author. Let's click on send now and look at the HTTP response. As you can see, the body of the HTTP response is this, and it is a JSON object. So the newly created book record has been returned in the body of the HTTP response. You can see that the title is title 3, just like we specified here in the request, and the author is author 3, just like we specified in the request. And additionally, we also see the ID of the book record because a new book record has been added to books.json. So let's go to books.json and check if we can find this record over there. So I have opened books.json now, and as you can see, our HTTP request resulted in a new record being added to books.json. The title and author values have come from the HTTP request that we sent from Postman. Let us next update a book record. To update a record, we have to either use the put or the patch methods. The put method will result in the entire record being updated, while the patch method results in partial updates. Let's first use the patch method, and let's use that against the URL /books followed by the ID of the book. Let's update the title of the newly created book from title 3 to new title. So the ID that we'll have to specify in the URL is the value 3. So let us specify /books/3. So let's do that. I'll change the HTTP request method from post to patch, and in the URL I'll specify /books/3 because we want to update the newly created book record with the ID 3. Under headers, I'll leave the content type as application/JSON, and under body, I'll specify the JSON data as title, and I'll give the new value as new title. So what we want to do is we want to update this title over here from title 3 to new title. Before clicking on send, let us examine the HTTP request by going to code. We can see the HTTP request that Postman has created for us. Let's examine the request line. The HTTP request method is patch followed by /books/3, which is the path to the book record with ID 3, and then followed by the HTTP version. Below that, we have 3 headers: host, content type, and content length. And then below the headers, we have an empty line. And then below the empty line, we have some JSON data, which consists of one key, title, and the new value of title, which is new title. Let's click on send now. And as you can see, we have some JSON data in the body of the response. We can see that the value of title is new title, which is the same as what we specified in the HTTP request. And the JSON object includes the other fields of the record as well, like author and ID. Let's go to books.json and see if the title of ID 3 really got updated to new title. So this is the book record with ID 3, and as you can see here, the value of title has been updated to the value new title. Previously it used to be title 3, now it has been updated to new title, and that is because of our patch request where we send this JSON data to /books/3. And finally, let us delete a book record. To delete a book record, we need to use the delete HTTP request method against the URL /books followed by the ID of the book. Let's delete the book record with ID 3. So instead of 1 over here, we'll specify the value 3. So let's do that. So I'm going to change the HTTP request method to delete, and I'll leave the URL as /books/3 because we want to delete the book record with ID 3. A delete operation does not require a message body. So let's remove this. So I'm going to clear this message over here, and under headers, let's leave content-type as application/JSON. Before we click on send, let's examine the HTTP request by going to code. So I'm going to click on code now, and this is the HTTP request that Postman has created for us. Let's examine the request line. The HTTP request method is delete and the path is /book/3 because we want to delete the book record with ID 3, and that is followed by the HTTP version, and below that we have a couple of headers, host and content type. Let's click on send now, and you can see that the response is an empty JSON object. This indicates that the book record with ID 3 has been deleted. Let's go to books.json and check that, and as you can see here, there is a book record with ID 1 and there is a book record with ID 2, but there is no book record with ID 3. The new book record that we had created has now been deleted. So we have created HTTP requests for all of these operations for books using Postman. Let us next look at how to retrieve reviews of a particular book record. If you observe the fields of the review record, we have specified the book ID within the review record. And that means this review record belongs to the book record with ID 1. Using the book ID field, we have established a relationship between reviews and books. So let's see how a REST URL will look like for such related data. And this is how a REST URL will look like for related data. So to get hold of the reviews of the book record with ID 1, we'll have to write /books/1/reviews. And we'll have to use the get HTTP request method. So let's do that. I'll leave the HTTP request method as get over here, and I'll change this URL to /books/1/reviews. I'll leave the content type as application/JSON, and I'm going to click on send over here now. And as you can see, in the response we have an array, and in the array we have one record here, and this record is the review record. As you can see, the fields are ID, review and book ID. So basically the response is a list indicated by the array over here, and the response includes the list of reviews of the book with ID 1. In a real world application, there are all sorts of relationships between entities, so it is very common to see URLs like this, and any team or company that uses REST will build their URLs like this. Let's look at one more operation. Let's see if we can create a new review for the book record with ID 1. Let's see what happens when we make a post request to this URL /books/1/reviews. What that will do is it will create a new review for this book record with ID 1. So let's do that. So I'm going to change this HTTP request method from get to post, and I'll leave this URL as /books/1/reviews, and I'll also leave the content type header as application/JSON. And since it is a post request to create a new review, we need to specify the details of the new review in the body of the HTTP request. So let's write some JSON data in the body. Make sure that raw and JSON are selected over here. The only field that a review record has other than ID and book ID is the field with the name review. So in the JSON data, we'll have to specify the field review over here. And let's specify the value as lorem ipsum new review. Let's go to code and examine the HTTP request once. And as you can see here, this is the HTTP request that Postman has created for us. Let's examine the request line. The HTTP request method is post, and we have specified the path as /books/1/reviews. Below the request line, we have some headers, and then we have a blank line, and then we have some JSON data. And the JSON data consists of only one field, review, with the value as lorem ipsum new review. Observe that we are not specifying book ID in the JSON data over here, and that is because the ID of the book is already present in the URL over here. So the API can look at this URL and figure out that the book ID in question is 1. So let's click on send now, and as you can see here, we have a review record being returned to us in the response. If you examine the fields, the review field has the value as lorem ipsum new review, which is what we specified in the message of the HTTP request. We can also see that the book ID field is there and its value is 1, and that 1 value came from the 1 in the URL here. And finally, the review has the ID 3. So if we go to books.json, there should be a new review record with the ID 3. So let's check books.json now. So if we look at reviews here, we can see that there is a new review record with the ID 3, and its book ID is 1, and its review value is lorem ipsum new review, which is what we specified in the HTTP request. So we have seen some operations with books, and we have also seen a couple of operations where we have made use of the data relationship between books and reviews.